Welcome to Radio Free Will, a podcast for sovereign people. I'm your host, George McCullough, and with us today is Michelle Mockers once again. Michelle, how are you?
Very well, George, very well so far.
We're at the end of the year, and Michelle, you just celebrated your, what was
97.
it? 97th birthday, and I was lucky enough to go to your party. I gotta say, it was a wonderful party.
Thank you. But that makes me one of the vet of the world, because this year there have been a lot of celebration about the war. You know, even I watched the Queen of England for her birth, you know, good year, even talk about the war. You know, it was a celebration, it was a reminiscence of the war this year. And so it's why I would eventually, being at that time a real European, Frenchman, talk a little about what it was. You know, I had the occasion to talk to a young kid, let's say 18 to 22, something like that, who had no experience at all of the war. And of course, I need that, my dear. Yeah, I have something happening to my voice.
Well, you said you were giving a lecture to some young people during your...
Yeah, it was absolutely unexpected. But they were all a group of young people, let's say from 18 to 22, basically 18 to 22. And it's not the first time, it was the last time. And all of a sudden, I say, you know, at your age, Germany declared war to France. I was in college. It was in September, but in September it was, you know, the big holidays. I was in La Baule on the beach, you know, so I kept on the beach on La Baule up to the end, and I went to college. Nothing was happening. Nothing did happen for almost 1 year. Nothing did happen.
What, after
no
they
war.
declared war?
I mean, declare war, but nothing did happen. So, life is life. I went back to college, and I was supposed to have my diploma, which is about, in France, the baccalaureate is something like, they say, 2 years past the high school, 2 years after the high school.
How old were you?
I am born in 22, so the war was in 69. I was 17 years old. So, as nothing was happening, I went
39.
back.
39.
So,
The war was in 39.
So yeah, 39. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, you know, nothing happening. I went back to college to have my diploma in college. And it was in June that the German invaded France, and instead of going to have my diploma, I ran away.
Did France start gearing up for war against Germany, or they just said that pay attention to it?
We were at war since 9 months or something like that, and absolutely nothing did happen, which is even difficult to understand, as between the British and the French, we had more airplanes, we had more tanks, we had more anything than the German. We let the German build up what they needed to make the war to everybody. I don't know, it's impossible to explain why. It went like that, you know. Chamberlain and people like that, they believed that they would have peace, you know. They believed that Hitler was saying, oh, I will not attack you. They believe it.
When did Germany go into Austria?
Well, but that was before going to France. You know, that was something else. In France, on the front, you know, British and French, absolutely nothing happened until June. And in June, the German came through the Ardennes, the only place that the big guy in France said it's impossible for the German to pass by. That's the only place they passed by. So they were surprising everybody. So all of a sudden, I was in college, and it was my father say, hey, you don't stay here, you go away. He went through World War I. He said, I don't want you. You are 17 years old, 18 years old. I don't want you to stay here. We don't know what the Germans are going to do. So, my dear, it was the beginning of my life of 4 years of going here and there to escape the German. Because the first thing that the German did was to service du travail obligatoire, obligatory service of work to Germany. You were supposed at 18 years old to go to work in a German factory to make obus and, to make guns and all that and all that. So I didn't want to do that, and we didn't want to do that. We had to escape the German. And it was very difficult to escape the German because they were checking everybody, everywhere, every railroad station, every bus station, everywhere. It was really a pain in the neck. So for almost 3 years, out of 4 years that I went away, for almost 3 years, I ran away in all directions. I made 100, I learned, by the way, few jobs. I was hired to help to do this or to do that, to help the chairs, to make mattresses. I did absolutely everything, escaping the German every time they were coming in. Escaping. So 3 years of escaping the German. So at the end, my parents, I rented for my grandmother a little house, and there was two France, the France occupied and the Free French. Just at the limit, she rented a house at the limit of the Free French and French occupied, called by the river called Le Cher. That was the limit, that was the border, escaped by the German. But the German went inside, the French, the Free French. They were inside the Free French everywhere, and they had spies, they had people. The worst thing that the worst thing when we were dealing with people during that war is that you never knew, if you didn't know exactly the people, you never knew if you had to deal with somebody who was really on your side or was on the side of the Germans. You never knew that, and it was one of the very, very difficult things to do during the whole war, to escape the ears and the eyes of the Germans.
Did you ever get to see your family at this time while you're...
No, my father was remaining in La Baule, where he was the director of the casino in La Baule. So he was remaining over there to defend the whole building, the whole thing against the German, who transformed it into a hospital. It was a big, casino, but casino French way. It's not slot machines, not at all. It's completely different. It's a big place where you have spectacles, you have musical, you have all that, and the gambling rooms, you don't even see them when you come in, and no slot machines. So my father stayed over there to defend the building against the German. Mm-hmm. So I ran away, and I finally at the end, as I heard that my grandmother had that little house at the border of the Free French and French occupied, I said, I must go in. But before that, I was in Marseille, close to Marseille, the Mediterranean, because I had a brother who was 2 years younger than me, and he managed fake identity he wanted to be in the Navy. So he was accepted by the Navy and was going to Toulon, where all the French fleet was in Toulon, and he said, when I arrive in Toulon, all the French fleet was afire. The French destroyed their fleet not to give it to the Germans. So we met together at one of my uncle who was directing a big place, a souvenir of Marie Magdalena, one of those pilgrimage places. It was a big place. So we met, my brother and myself, we met over there, but after a few days of rest, you say, hey, we cannot stay like that, we have to do something. And we took a coin to decide who would be in France and who would be outside of France. So the coin went up, and the result was I was in France and my brother was outside of France. So the next morning, or 2 or 3 days later, he took a bus to Spain, because in Spain, the Mediterranean, you have only 3 passages from France to Spain. So as soon as he was in Spain, he was taken by the gendarme, by the guys, in Spain. But he said that he was a Canadian, that he was not French, because otherwise they would have sent him back to France right away. So he went to jail for 6 months. He was in jail for 6 months in Spain. And one day he saw one man coming saying, I bought you. He was the envoy of the Canadian government. And you know what is the price of a man in Spain in 1940, what, in 1941 or 42? A bag of corn. He said, I paid you with a bag of corn.
What did he take him back to Canada? And
Yeah, no, so he make him free from Spain. So he went to Lisbon, to Portugal. And from Portugal he went to North Africa, didn't like it in North Africa, managed to go to England, you know, clandestinely to go to England, and became a SAS in England. And was part of the D-Day and all that, you know, after that. I didn't hear of him as soon as he took the bus that next morning that we, put the coin up. I didn't see him at all, and I went my own way. So I said, I cannot stay in the south. There is nothing happening in the south. The German will never do anything in the south. At that time, you could not preview that they would go to Italy. It was absolutely impossible. So I said, I must go up north and see what I can do up north. And I would share just a little story, because my uncle Peter had one of the buildings was a school, official hostelry school, hotel school, to learn the girls how to do in an hotel, to do everything. But it was absolutely forbidden. It was an official school with the government, officiality of the government. But it was my uncle had closed absolutely all doors. You could not absolutely not go in that building. And the Gestapo figure out someday, I don't know how they did, but it's always the same thing. You never knew who knew what. If they were for the German, for the French, you never knew that. The Gestapo learned that it was girls, Jewish girls. Instead of learning girls, it was a Jewish girl camouflage in that hostelry, school. And they decided to take it over, to go up and take the girls and take everything and destroy everything, blah, blah, blah. And it was just the morning of the landing of the Allies in the south. So the Gestapo that day had other things to do than to go and pick up 25 girls. So the 25 girls, they remain alive. I saw some of them after that, But okay, that is a little story to tell you that all the French were doing sometimes their best.
Before I go to my next question, if folks are stumbling upon this podcast, Michel went into detail on our last 2 episodes on his experience in World War II fighting with the resistance, and I invite everybody to take a listen to those podcasts if they want to catch up. So what happened to the casino?
Well, the casino became an hospital. It was a beautiful building, if you want, flat building, with big rooms. There was the central room with a musical stage and everything. There was another room with another stage, and there was the banking room. All the... I lose my all of a sudden. Gambling room. So it was a beautiful flat building. And beautiful. So the German, when they saw that, they transformed it into a hospital.
Plus the Germans did.
The German did. Plus, it was on the beach.
Who were they taking care of? Their own Germans, or?
Oh no, they're German. They're soldiers. And they had the beach. The beach was next door. You just have to cross the street. You were on the beach. So they had the beach also for the German to take the sun or whatever it is. So it has been transformed into a hospital up to the end of the war, almost up to the end of the war. And my father stayed in La Baule to take care as much as possible of the casino. And
is it a casino today, or?
Oh, it's the same thing today. Absolutely the same thing today. Not with my father. But my father,
that would be a miracle.
But yeah, it's still absolutely. Come on, it was a beautiful building made for that, and it stayed for that in the nicest beach of the Atlantic for the French people. La Baule. And at the end of all the valley of the Loire, where all the industry and all that, so they all goes at the villa in La Baule, or they had a villa because now it's all built up everywhere. But, so, and I went back once, when I was a young man, young kid, 3 or 4 years old. My parents were living in Nantes. I am born in Nantes, not in Cannes, where all my children are born, not in Cannes, because at that time my father had a contract to work in Nantes, so he went to Nantes and my mother was pregnant. So
With you?
Yes, so I am born Nantes. So after the war, as I was an officer, I had a car, and I say, I'm going to see the house where I spent all the years that I can remember when I was 2, 3, 4 years old. There was a small garden. I was going, on a little bicycle and all that. So I'm going to see that. So I took the time to go, to drive, to go over there, and I arrived in that. It was a nice street, and I said, I must go to the 21st. So I go on. I see 21st. There was a big hole. There was a hole. The only house which has disappeared was my house. A lost American bomb. Mr. Clark Gable had done that to me, And come on. So instead of the house, there was just a big hole. That was it.
So we were talking before the podcast about Americans during the French, how the Americans helped out in the European theater.
No, what did happen, my dear? What did happen is that the English, French, what American everywhere, the Allied organized to send to France what they call British mission, made of British people. 3 people generally, 1 commanding, 1 second commanding, if you want, and 1 radio. The radio was the most important people, because without radio you were dead with London, if you want. And the radio, the German were making with 3 cars, they were making what they call a triangulation. With 3 cars on a triangle, they could hear, in an area, they could hear if there was a radio emission. They could pick it up. So that was one of the danger of being a radio was the most important thing of all. So they sent the British, the Allied, sent basically British mission in France, a little everywhere, and those British mission had 2 jobs to do. To eventually find if there was some resistance and give the resistance the armaments they needed. That was one thing. And also get from the resistance all the information they needed, as much information as possible. It's how, for an example, one afternoon I was said that the German was reopening a small airfield that I could see from my grandmother's house. And it was a military airfield that has been shut down at the end of the war, French Germany. And there were some German trucks. There was 1 French officer in charge of the whole thing, as a guardian of the whole thing, who came to one of my men, he was cousin, to tell me that the German were there to reopen the field. And effectively, the German was there with several trucks, and they wanted to reopen that little airfield. I told that to my boss. The name of my boss was Pearl. I told her, hey, listen, I told her that in the afternoon, they are reopening the airfield. At 5 in the afternoon, she sent that to London. They are reopening the airfield, and it's very dangerous, of course, if you have a plan. At 9 in the next morning, and the house of my grandmother, I told you, was on top of the hill, I could see it. I could see a big formation of bombers, American bombers, coming above the Lille airfield and bomb absolutely. They destroy it absolutely, completely. The German could never use it.
But it was American planes.
Yeah, that's American plane in the morning. The American were by day, the British by night. Always. The British were bombing by night and the American basically bombing by day. So that morning at 9 o'clock, and you can see it like, like you see it today, you can see it today. A formation, maybe there were 40 or 50 bombers, and they absolutely destroyed the whole thing. The German could not use it. That was very important. So that was one, if you want, of the mission, of the job of the British mission to know, to recall that type of news and to do something about things that they could help. And the other thing was to send armaments, because in the beginnings, the resistance, you had a lot of people who wanted to resist the Germans, but who you could do absolutely nothing up to the D-Day. It was absolutely practically impossible to fight the German with armaments that we didn't have, by the way. And I don't know why I started to create a group of 12 men before the D-Day. So at the D-Day, and get in touch with the British mission that was sent in our area. So at the D-Day, I transported those 12 people next to the British mission. And you believe it or not, D-Day, all the men came out from you don't know where. I had never seen them. I was in a farm. I was never see them. In 1 week, I had 100 people. There was one of the group a little further on, in a little more populated area. In 1 week, he had 800 people. So I was the one that the British mission put me in charge to know what was the need of all the group around us.
Food.
No, everything. No, everything. I was in charge of the money because they were sending money, and a big box of money, by plane. And the French money.
Was it French money?
I have always
shoes?
I have always wondered. What kind of money was that? I did make that money the day before to send us to us the day after. Come on, a big box of money that was in my charge, and plus when I was, for example, we needed a car. I was not paying for a car. I didn't know a car. I was giving you a piece of paper. I this day took the car, blah 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 blah, and at the end of the war, the French government paid everything that I give a ticket for. Everything. They paid absolutely everything. In the meantime, I was receiving that big box of money, and Pearl was telling me, you are in charge of the money. But, my dear, the British mission was more important than me, because the British mission disappeared, the contact disappeared, the armaments disappeared. So she was too happy, if you want to find a guy who could go around. So I went around all the groups, all the groups which were around us. Something like, I fed something like, let's say, basically more than 2,000 people. But, and, the first time that I had those guys, I had 12 people. So the 12 people were eating, eating where they were, eating, all of a sudden, all together. And all of a sudden, the 12 were 100. The biggest problem was not armaments, food.
Yeah.
How do you support all of a sudden 100 people who need to eat? Come on. So, so the armaments are number two. And the armaments, so the British send us armament, the containers, the whole story on the field, blah, blah, blah. Okay, they send us the armament. But most of the armaments, many things were that shotgun, I don't remember the name of it all of a sudden. And it was the worst thing in the world. You could not absolutely not kill somebody with that, except if you were a specialist, because that machine, number one, if you were putting all the 32 bullets, it was not working. It was one bullet too many. You were supposed to put 32. The people who knew were only putting 31 because with 32, the thing was clinching and not working. And if you wanted to kill somebody with that, first it was very short. You could not go to the distance, and you have to start really completely on the left of the person that you wanted to kill, because the machine was going up when you were pushing all the bullets. That machine was
What
going
were the German armaments like?
Oh no, it could not fight against the German armaments. It was really absolutely the only thing that we could eventually fight was some real let's say automatic guns and some carbines, but the most important thing was also the plastic where you could blow up everything with. So that was very important, and they sent us a lot of plastic, my dear. We blew up a lot of things.
So the wars ended with the atomic bomb going off. When did France get
The France they get delivered. The Paris was delivered on July 44, but my area lower, because where we were, I must tell you something, that where we were with my grandmother was exactly on the passage, because you know of the France, the middle of France, it's mountains and the roads are very, very bad. And beside that, it was the passage of all the German troops coming from Spain, all the Atlantic, you know, they have those submarines and all that, and they were passing by our route to reach Vierzon, where you had a railroad station where they could go directly. The railroad station had still an open rail to go directly to Germany. So they were saving their tanks. They were passing with their tanks to save their tanks and put them on the train to Germany, because they were, you know, at a point they were retreating. And what was very funny is what the retreating, you had the German retreating who didn't give a damn about retreating the war and everything, and those who were still very, 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 very stiff, you know, very Nazi-like. It was a strange melange. I saw a car, a beautiful Renault convertible, you know, going on with 4 officers, German officers on board. They had only one thing missing, the tires. So they had no tires. So they were going. I saw 6. I count them. 50 guys with bicycles. No one of the bicycles had tires, but just pieces of to whatever it is, you know, to make like a tire. So that was the type of German. They didn't give them. Once we captured, we were told that there were 6 German or 7 German along the railroad, because we were at the crossing of north-south France and east-west. That was where we were, just at that crossing. So it was very important railroad, if you want. And we learned that we had 7 Germans on the road and we should pick them up. So I was not allowed, you know, the fact that I was part of the British mission had given me the interdiction to fight. I was much more important and irreplaceable, if you want, difficult to replace, if you want. So I was not supposed to fight, but I say, oh, I go as a witness, you know, and I want to go to stop those 7 guys, and we are going to get them. So we went with 3 cars full of French guys, you know, and to pick up the 7 Germans along the railroad. The railway, not the railroad, the railway. So we arrived at the place where they were, and they were not fighting at all. They were on the grass, landing, taking the sun with their gun far from them. And when they say, we are very pleased, pick us up. You know, you had done those who said, that's the end of the war for them. We keep them well in the woods, with just a little fence, you know, when they could go over the fence. No one went over the fence. They were too well. They were fed. They didn't fight. They were happy. So that was it, you know. That was the end of the war for them. So we pick up those 7 guys. They just went in the cars, you know, like that. Say, hey, guys, like that. That was it.
Have you ever visited Germany?
Yeah, after the war, yes, I went.
And where did you go?
At Munich for the beer. The day of the beer.
And what
I
did you,
did make it in purpose. The day of the beer. I arrived the day of the feast of the beer in Munich. So, hey, what do you do with the feast of the beer?
and what did you think of Germany?
I went, you know, I went.
Were you bitter at the German people?
Oh yeah, basically, let's say they say that about 10% of the population was Nazi, registered as Nazi, plus the army. And you know that the army, they had those, they were obliged to take those little pills, to give them some strength. So you become crazy when you get those pills. So they are ready to kill absolutely everything, to go to Russia, to go anywhere, with the pills. So that was absolutely terrible. But listen, all the men, I went with about 2,000 men, except there was one group who was communist, directed by a big guy, communist big guy. So one morning, Pearl told me, they are asking for 1,000 guns. Go and see why they want 1,000 girls. So she sent me, that was my job. So I find them, I go with my car in the woods, and I find them, and they receive me in the middle of their little group. And the big boss say, I want 1,000. I say, for what? If I count the men here, you have no more than 100 men. And he say, oh, you wise, because it's exactly 100 men. I say, why 1,000? Oh, he say, oh, we want to give the population are ready to fight, to put the German away. And after a little while, he told me, you make your war, and we make our war. And those German group of communists, they made very, very, very few things in the resistance, that they were ready to go to take over France at the end of it. And at the liberation, they effectively went to the, we were in a department with the official buildings and official people. They took all over, and they took the road all over. So I knew that, and I have something altogether like more than 2,000 men, and trucks to go with that. And so I sent that to them with the order to them to, if they were not leaving right away, you took them prisoner. And we reopened the door. But and it's why Leclerc, in fact, they sent Leclerc in Paris. The Americans were the first to reach Paris. They didn't go into Paris. They waited until Leclerc, the French, commanding officer of the tanks, was there, because the French were to take Paris because the communists wanted to take Paris before the army. So
But these were French communists.
Oh yeah, absolutely French communists. They wanted to take Paris. They had guns, supposedly de la résistance. So they had enough guns to take Paris. So the American, and everybody knew it. So American waited at the door of Paris, waited until Leclerc could go into Paris and deal with the communists. So when I say you don't have, I tell him I give you for 100. As soon as I say that, I had 2 guns in my back. I say, you don't play that game, my dear, because if you play that game in half an hour, you are all out of here. So he let me go. But you see how it was. He told me specifically, we are not making your war, we are making our war. So that was the communists, my dear, at that time. So, so I had and one, the whole example.
But you had friends as communists, right?
Eh?
You had a lot of friends that were communists. Right?
Before the war, France was voting 25% communist. 25%. So it's why I believe that, the Marshall Plan was not a plan to rebuild, but was an against the communism. Because if the town have not been rebuilt and all that, the communists would have took over. They were ready to take over.
And what would France be like today if that happened?
Communist?
You think they would still be communists today?
Why not? China is communist.
Yeah.
You don't invade.
Not in a fashion I would like to see.
You don't invade a country because it's communist. Who would invade France?
Well, we
And
invaded.
plus, at the end of the war, when the Allied went and then they went in Germany, and all of a sudden, all the Germans, those who were the great, who were official people in town, the mayor and all that, they were back. They were all back because otherwise it was complete disorder. So those people were the people able to have the German machine back together. So none of them went to jail. All those Germans who were more or less Nazi, they went to jail. They didn't.
What happened to the communists after the liberation of Paris?
They were off.
still organized?
Oh
and-
no, they were completely. They could do absolutely nothing at all. They wanted to take the main buildings and order from the main buildings. The usual revolution. But that was. They were not able to do it, so they had absolutely no power at all after that. And today the communists are voting in France. I believe that one of the latest vote was 3% or something like that. You know that the system in France, not only in France, in Sweden or other places, all the parties have the same advertising, paid by the government. The government do not allow you to have Mr. So-and-so giving $1 million to have this party coming on. That is absolutely anti-democracy. But the better democracy is to say all the parties have the right to exist, which is not true here. You only have the Republican and the Democrat at the election. You do not have another party, and they do not exist. So all the parties exist at the condition, the government paid everything, at the condition that they made a minimum, I believe it was 6% of the population. Under 6% of the population, you will have to pay for the advertising. And the communists found out they were 3.5%. And they were absolutely furious. They had to pay. They had to pay for the advertising for the election.
They need better ads then. We're getting close to the end of the show. I just want to remind everybody that you've written a book, René's War.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did put you changed the cover than this original
Yeah,
edition
and you can find it at Amazon.
at Amazon. And if folks want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
I have an email, Michel Mokers, one word, at gmail.com.
And a website.
The website is no-. I'm already lost this
I
morning.
thought I stumped you there for a second.
No-pennies. No-pennies.com.
Okay.
You know why I wrote that book? I never wanted to write a book, but I have been in my life. I did collaborate. I did work for some very big French newspapers for all my life almost. So one day, one of my friends is dead now, but he was a senator and in charge of all the French of the East Coast here. He said, if you don't write it, it will be lost forever. And I never intended to read it. But he told me, he insisted me to do that. I sat in the corner of the table and at once, like I make an article of newspaper that you have to give to the next morning to the editor, the same thing. So that's the book of, if you want, my personal war. I could not tell, I didn't want to make an history of the whole war and the whole resistance. I make the example of what one was doing. So I say, I was doing this, I was doing that, because that gives the example of what was going in the resistance.
Well, the book's been very well received, and I encourage everybody to get a copy. And certainly leave your comments leave a review of the book on Amazon.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to read some of the comments, right?
Yeah.
So this is our last show of
Of
2019.
Of the year.
I want to wish everybody a very, very happy New Year. hopefully, it will be full of peace and love.
Absolutely.
And until next year, folks.
Listen, dear, after all what I say about the war, I was talking to those young kids, I am absolutely against any form of war. And when you look at once more, when you look at the history of what I call the written history of the 5,000 or 6,000 years, not before there was no written history. It's a long history of wars. There are always wars somewhere. So maybe, it's time for humanity. If humanity wants to survive, the people, the men, to get together and be a little more friendly with each other instead of fighting against each other.
Yeah, I think I believe in the saying, no peace, no justice. No justice, no peace. And so we're working towards a just world.